Welcome to the podcast, everybody. This is Cure8'd Conversations. I'm Eric Schlissel with Cure8, and today I'm joined by my friends from Minnesota, Laura and Leili. Laura and Leili from Blunt Strategies. Firstly, do you mind introducing yourselves to everybody that's watching today?
Yeah, happy to. I'm Leili Fatehi, partner and principal at Blunt Strategies. We are a full-service public affairs and strategic consultancy for the cannabis industry. We're the first and only cannabis-dedicated strategic consultancy in the state of Minnesota. We work with clients at all stages of their journey into the cannabis industry here in Minnesota. We're also the team that led the legalization effort here in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm Laura, and what she
said. So what are your roles at Blunt Strategy? How do you collaborate?
Yeah, so we started Blunt Strategies in 2019, right when Minnesota's hemp program was beginning to get off the ground. It was also right when Governor Walz had been elected, and he was the first governor to indicate that he was supportive of adult use legalization.
Governor Ventura, hold on a second. Didn't Governor?
Correct, Governor Ventura, yes, but Governor Walz came in, and the time seemed right with Democrats beginning to lead on the issue here in Minnesota as well. And so a lot of what our work has been in the state has been helping to form the industry here in Minnesota. We have an interesting situation here in Minnesota where we do have an incumbent industry, and that incumbent industry is our hemp-derived industry. We obviously did a lot of the work to legalize the hemp-derived product market here in Minnesota and then work with businesses on their transition there. And now we really see our role as being the stewards of this Minnesota model that we've passed here in Minnesota, this model that is designed to prioritize smaller scale businesses, a more equitable marketplace, one that's more craft-based and more distributed throughout the state, less stigmatized. And so we spend a lot of time with individual clients, but quite frankly, with folks across the industry and also in government, making sure that we have the shared infrastructure and capacity that's necessary to stand up our market according to this model and for it to be successful.
The model's brilliant. Let's take a step back, though, and we'll get to that. I want to talk about what it was like when you started. Right, you have a Democratic governor coming in, Republican legislature. What was the status? How did it work?
Yeah, so when we started, cannabis legalization was kind of still a third rail topic, even with Democrats in this state. Even Democrats didn't have a unified position on it. It wasn't on the state party platform. But Minnesota has had one of the oldest traditions nationwide in terms of grassroots advocacy when it comes to legalization. Our grassroots legalization party, which is the third third issue party that's been focused on cannabis legalization, that's been around since the 50s. And prior to Governor Walz taking office, we had two single issue third parties that were cannabis legalization parties that reached the threshold for major party status here in Minnesota, because there has been so much widespread support for legalization. But as you said, we've had divided government. We didn't even really have a ton of leadership within our Democratic Party on the issue. And so when we started, what we really saw as the deficit was in the grass tops infrastructure, meaning that work to really connect the people that have been doing the great work at the grassroots to get support among Minnesotans for legalization, and then translating it into a policy platform and a policy framework that resonated with Minnesotans across the state and with Minnesota values, with this being an agricultural state, a strongly labor state. Our Democratic Party here is actually called the DFL. It's the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. And so, really bringing our model in alignment with that. and then certainly communication with the public as well, which Laura can speak to.
Yeah, certainly. And to pick up on Leili's point, the grass tops was all the more essential as Minnesota does not have ballot initiatives. Many other states legalized through getting it on a ballot, getting it to the voters. That was not at our disposal. So it was really critical to do that intentional work to build the grass tops. And as Leili already alluded to, the communication with the public that they weren't going to see it on a ballot, that was not the most likely way that we were going to get this done. As a quick aside, it could have gone on a ballot as a constitutional amendment. However, that still would have required legislature to sign off on it. So regardless, we had to go through our split legislature, and we knew that was going to take time, and it was going to take education on multiple fronts. So certainly with the legislators themselves, helping them understand why this was something worth them taking on and making sure that we did it right. And with the public to understand that, it wasn't going to be signing a petition. It wasn't going to be showing up to vote per se, certainly voting for who was going to represent them at the legislature, but making sure that folks understood that this was going to be a different process than maybe they had heard about or were expecting.
So that's amazing. So when you got started, there were two parties that had laid some of the groundwork, but it sounds like they didn't have legislation ready. And it didn't sound like they were communicating with the folks that vote.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't legislation prepared in large part because, the issue wasn't ripe enough for legislators to be leading on it. And so when we started our effort, the original entity that we started was called Minnesotans for Responsible Marijuana Regulation. And like I said, it was really focusing on that, softening the ground and creating the permission structure for Democrats to begin leading on this issue. We were fortunate that our then majority leader, Ryan Winkler, really came to understand that there was strong support for this. And he put a lot of, his leadership and the resources that were available to him into doing exactly what a good public servant in this situation does, which is engaging with the local stakeholders and the local experts. He did a statewide listening tour across the state to find out what were people's hopes and concerns about cannabis legalization. And he ultimately ended up becoming the author of the first robust cannabis legalization bill. And as the majority leader, he had the support of his caucus behind it. And through doing that really robust engagement with the folks that were doing the grassroots work, as well as us, who were really, beginning to put together a coalition of not just the grassroots, pro-legalization groups, but also organized labor and farming and nonprofit and, all the civic organizations together, really working with us to come up with a policy that resonated with both the values and the aspirations of local advocates and local industry leaders, but also Minnesotans writ large.
So it sounds like the listening tour softened the ground, as you said, for folks that really didn't have a pathway to get from an idea to seeing how it can actually be implemented.
Absolutely. And it also created a platform for Minnesotans who perhaps were not yet sure about legalization and what it might mean to feel that they were being heard out, honestly, about what those concerns were that they had by the leader that was convening the cohort to put together the legislation. And so I think that really contributed to what the ultimate ethic was among the advocacy community, but also the lawmakers when it came time then to really begin to develop a policy. That original bill that Majority Leader Winkler had put together, it passed through the House, but we really, the first year that it passed through, we still had a Republican Senate. They didn't even, give the thing a hearing. We really used the many House committees that it went through as an opportunity to open up a bipartisan conversation. to especially get even Democrats who were still on the margin to be able to really flesh out these conversations in the course of committee hearings, and for the public to be able to see a robust cannabis bill go through the entire committee process, so that then at the end of that session, which was in an election year, and it became time now for us to sort of move into the next phase. That next phase was to bring together all of the grassroots organizations, that incumbent hemp industry, the folks from the legacy market, our friends from nonprofit and labor, everyone under the umbrella of MN is Ready. And that became the campaign all the way through the end. But after that session, everyone was unified under this umbrella of MN is Ready, even the third parties. And what we did was we selected those key legislative races where actually there were third-party candidates running under the banner of these third-party, and this is where it gets really interesting. The Republicans started using our single-issue cannabis parties to run foil candidates. And so we had the prior year, even a congressional seat that we lost because of a phony third-party candidate running and siphoning votes away from Democrats, from folks that were supportive of legalization. And so the infrastructure and the trust we were able to build allowed us to work with the leaders, the folks that started these third parties, to target those key legislative districts where it could flip Republican or Democrat and a third party candidate could make the difference. And they helped us campaign to get pro-legalization Democrats elected. And that is when we knew it was go time, that we had that Democratic trifecta that would allow us to actually, pass a legalization bill.
So you did the groundwork, creating the groundswell while it was split. And
it was while it was split, yes. And then, the passage of the law that legalized the hemp-derived edibles and beverages also, played a really significant role in the story of how Minnesota got to where we are.
Did that pass in a split legislation? It did.
It did.
And then how did the folks that were against cannabis get on board with the hemp-derived products?
That's a matter of some debate.
That's a matter of some, yes. And the stories that kind of came out of Minnesota were like, whoops, Minnesota accidentally legalized, but that for sure was not the case. And even though a few of the Republicans that even voted for it said, oops, we didn't understand what was in it, the authors certainly did, and it was heard even in committee. That legislation came about by virtue of the fact that we started seeing these hemp-derived THC products that were sprouting up everywhere. They were being sold on the internet. They were coming in from other states. They were completely unregulated. No packaging requirements, no labeling requirements. We were seeing them in, 100 milligram, 500, just enormous dosages showing up all over the place. But Minnesota hemp businesses are not able to manufacture or sell any of these products in the state of Minnesota because our state laws didn't allow it. And so really the impetus for our lawmakers was two things. One was to take these products that were already, in this federal murky gray area and coming in and put in place a regulatory framework that would ensure that they were sold in a more safe manner, and also to then, create a regulatory framework that would allow for responsible Minnesota businesses to begin manufacturing and selling these. So
the messaging was let's take what's already out there and rampant and get control of it for safety and for taxation, all the other stuff. And that got you an audience.
And let's not keep Minnesotans out of what is already happening around us. The last thing we wanted was to give up market share when these products, as Leili said, were already well on their way coming in.
100%.
Mm-hmm. But we also, those of us that work on the political side, of course, we knew that this was also a huge opportunity, that once consumers were able to access these lower potency THC products, and especially when they were able to do so in places like, their local craft brewery or at their local hemp shops, which by and large have been wellness focused shops. And that it would destigmatize the product, that it would demonstrate to them that the folks that are interested in working in the cannabis industry here in Minnesota are their neighbors. These are local operators. This was very consistent with this craft model that we'd been envisioning all the way back since 2018. And so we really saw this as an opportunity to do that destigmatization, but also I think few people appreciate what a coup this was in terms of a social equity catalyst. And that is that it allowed a lot of our local hemp-derived businesses and even folks that, had an eye for wanting to go into the adult use space to establish their businesses, get their footprint, develop their brand, get consumers to, get a strong consumer base, build out their supply chain, do all of that with the benefits of a product that is at least federally legal enough that you get, 280E benefits and you get the benefits of, banking and things like that, so that they're capitalized to now withstand the uncertainties that come with standing up an adult use market and making that transition. And I think that we're seeing that we were successful in doing that a lot of those businesses are the ones now that are the most operationally ready to get licensed for adult use.
Well, a lot of this will play out over time, right? You can have all the structure in the world in place, but then we see that things unfold the way that they do. We've seen other markets really fall apart with their social equity programs and so on. How are you providing, or how is the state, providing resources to folks that are just getting into the industry from a social equity perspective?
So the law that passed last year has provisions in it for the state to provide grants and forgivable loans and technical assistance and things like that, especially to social equity businesses. Unfortunately, I think, as has been the case in a lot of other states, the rollout of those programs is lagging behind where it needs to be, because these businesses need to get kind of operationally ready now. And quite frankly, what's even more concerning to us right now is the lack of clarity and the delays that we're already beginning to see with even the licensing timeline, which again, when you're trying to set up a market that is geared towards social equity and it is geared towards incubating an industry ecosystem of smaller craft businesses, they're the ones that are the least able to withstand uncertainty in that licensing timeline and process, just because they can't get investments, they can't secure leases and things like that. So this is something that is a cause for concern here in Minnesota, and it's something that folks like us who've been working at that intersection of the policy development, the politics, and then the formation of the industry, we're beginning to realize that we're going to need to shift pretty quickly to bringing the same sort of creativity and ingenuity that we brought to the policy development, to very quickly standing up some public-private partnership type work, beginning to look at what some of our regional economic development authorities, beginning to look at what are those other sources of cash that may be more flexible to begin directing these resources towards our business, because the state government it cannot be the exclusive thing that we have our eyes on.
100%. We've seen how that plays out in New York. Right, we're as a company very active in New York with a lot of the DASNY projects, and we've seen that there's an inherent unfairness to it, which is exactly counter to what the intention was. And the way it played out, as I'm sure you know, a lot of the social equity folks are now going to market at the same time as the people that were in the general lottery, and that's really distressing. It's really sad to see. So do you still have time to get ahead of that?
Well, our big push in our legislative session ends in 11 days. Our legislation right now is in conference committee with some weak provisions. We think weak provisions for early cultivation. These are provisions that are setting aside early cultivation licensing for the category of social equity applicants, but our concern is that the timeline is going to be exactly what you described, such that, by the time they're doing the vetting for social equity and then doing the process for those early cultivation licenses, that by and large, we're going to see, that category not really matter anymore. What we've been advocating for is that they begin licensing operationally ready businesses as soon as they can, regardless of scale, but especially, focusing on those micro businesses. Those micro businesses are the bulk of where you're going to see your social equity applicants here in the state of Minnesota. It's also where there's a ton of operational preparedness, because it's where our legacy growers are. There are a lot of legacy growers, and I think the state has just underestimated this, who have been planning to be, compliant and ready to go. And the more we're making them wait, the more we are actually, galvanizing a legacy market that's not going to transition over.
100%.
And, but these are real political challenges. One challenge that we have here in Minnesota that I think has really only gotten fleshed out in like the last week as we've been hitting static on this issue of early cultivation is that we have tribal nations in this state that are entitled as sovereign nations to doing compacting with our state, and they can operate their own cannabis programs, including adult use programs. Some of them have already started cultivation, but they're compacting to figure out, where and under what circumstances they can put, say, dispensaries on so-called fiduciary lands, which is just like land that they're leasing somewhere. These are all things that are anticipated in the bill, but the timing of how does that compacting happen with social equity?
Would it have been possible to foresee this at all and build the structure into the bill? Or is this the type of thing you just figure out as you go?
Some of this was foreseeable, but, we anticipated that we would need to do more legislative work this year. Part of what has made some of these things challenging is that we have adopted a fundamentally different model here in Minnesota. And so it's not as easy as just being like, here's the playbook from another state, right. Do it this way. That's part of the challenges. The other thing that just has been both the blessing that has allowed us to do what we've done here in Minnesota, but continues to just be a systemic challenge for us. Part of the reason we were able to do what we did here in Minnesota is because of who was at the table and who was putting the resources and the effort into legalization, into the policy development. As we were talking about, when we started our effort, we had a divided government. We don't have ballot initiatives. And so when we went to groups like Marijuana Policy Project and, the groups that oftentimes will go to states and stand up legalization campaigns, they said, you guys are really far away from legalization. There's lower hanging fruit. So they didn't invest in our campaigns. The folks that invested in the political and the advocacy infrastructure and the industry infrastructure here, again, have been the folks from the hemp market, folks from the legacy market, the local grassroots advocates, and then people like us who are, we're Minnesota based. That allowed us, when it came time to actually pass a law, to say no to money from MSOs, to say no to money from these national groups, and to go it alone. But what it means is that, by and large, our industry's lobbying infrastructure continues to be very grassroots.
100%. How did you size the legacy market, and how did you outreach to them?
The way we've been able to do outreach and to size the legacy market is just that, like, we're we show up in the community. I mean, we are known entities to the folks in our state's incumbent cannabis industry, by which we mean the legacy industry. These are the individuals that were at the heart of the campaign work that we did, whether it was lobbying or it was doing electoral work. And these are the folks that we really see as the ones that, should be the beneficiaries of legalization, that have the expertise. And so, we show up to be supportive for their events when those things were happening under the banner of the legacy marketplace. And now as they're trying to transition, we're doing what we can to support them in that. And so we have a level of trust where we're able to call our friends and folks in our networks and say, call your friends and ask them, if you had the ability to be licensed under these circumstances, how quickly would you be able to stand up? How many square feet would you be able to get operational, on what kind of timeline? And they provided that input, which is part of the reason I'm so concerned about now the posture of the state government being to just sort of put them on pause when it comes to licensing them.
And they're happy with, I wouldn't say happy, I would say they're comfortable with the amount of competition that's coming because they're getting a pathway to being legal and to competing in the marketplace, right?
That has always been, the promise at the heart of this model is that, we're creating something that is Minnesota first, it is craft first, it is equity first. And so it means you are affording the first mover advantage to those groups, and you are, providing a pathway that's designed to facilitate their success. Because again, we see the success of local stakeholders as being the success of Minnesotans. When people are building a business in their own community, they care about the impacts of their business for their community, about creating local jobs, about ensuring the public's safety, about educating their consumers and only providing the highest quality products. These are core Minnesota values. And so, this is why, we continue to hope that our legislators and regulators now understand and prioritize that.
Yeah, I really get that. I'm really impressed all around with how you guys have gone about getting to the finish line here. At many points, I'm sure that you thought things were falling apart. How did you overcome these challenges? It's like, I assume it's one issue after another that you have to overcome. It requires a tremendous amount of tenacity. Talk us through how you kept your head in the game and kept going.
Well, I think Laura and I, especially, our business is, we're a public benefit business. So Blunt Strategies is the cannabis division of a larger practice that we've had for many years called Apparatus. We are a mission-oriented entity. We work on complex policy and political issues where issues, especially of equity and economic fairness, are implicated, things that are especially politically challenging. And we're used to working on underdog issues. The kind of issues we worked on prior to cannabis were, we represented the Sierra Club against the building of the Line 3 oil pipeline, the Enbridge pipeline. We've worked on anti-mining legislation, in a state like Minnesota. We've worked on a lot of public education, housing. So we're used to working on complex issues where it often seems like things are falling apart. But at the end of the day, these are our community members. These are our friends. This is our state. And so this is sort of our calling. If it wasn't our line of work, it's what we'd be doing anyway. And this just seemed like something that, was at the intersection of our personal passions as cannabis enthusiasts, and as political activists. Laura, what do you think?
I think too, yeah, I think having all the things that Leili said, and I think coming with that kind of campaign background and mindset and desire to function that way also really helped. When the times got tough, especially, it's the legislative process. It's back and forth. There's hearings in the House. There's hearings in the Senate. There's conference committees. It's on the floor. It's off the floor. It's, things are switching to different days. There were days that we had upwards of 4 or 5 hearings happening, sometimes overlapping one another. And we were helping to wrangle testimony to be germane to that committee's purview of, their portion of a 300+ page bill. And I think one of the things that really helped in all of that was because it was a campaign and we treated it like a campaign, it meant bringing a lot of people along with us. So there were certainly, advocates and folks that we worked with directly at the Capitol, but there was also just the public. We did a lot of work to make sure that we had proactive communications going out, that we were helping educate people about the entirety of the process. What does it mean that this happened? What does it mean that this person just moved to make this amendment in this committee at this time? Do we like that? Do we not like that? They're voting no on something right now. Does that mean they're voting no on cannabis? No, don't worry. It means it's a procedural thing about this or that. So, really being proactive and bringing folks along with us and not dumbing it down or treating them like they couldn't understand it, but explaining along the way, this is complicated and odd in many ways. You don't really think about all the minutia that goes into any kind of governmental system like that. And so it was really a pleasure to be able, I learned a ton just being the main tweeter, because I was constantly interacting with people and telling them, okay, no, this is happening. It's okay that it got moved. It got moved because of this or that. This amendment is good. We like it. So it was fun. And I think that, the more the merrier. Misery loves company. I don't know, pick your poison, but it certainly made for feeling like there was a lot of camaraderie and there was a real groundswell of folks that were along for the ride.
So you have all of these different constituents with all of these different motivations. How do you pick the channel and the message for each one of those, and how do you keep them both segmented and all moving in the same direction at the same time?
Yeah, I really think that, the vision for the industry and this Minnesota model was the thing that ultimately everyone was able to rally behind as sort of a shared vision. And it was a thing that has been able to transform the marketplace here, where part of the reason I say we work with clients, but also across clients across the industry, is because it has just very much cemented this mentality that folks here have to be collaborative if we're going to be successful. Some of this is already baked into just the Minnesota culture. And I've lived in Minnesota for 20 years, but I'm from the East Coast. And so this is my adopted home and the place I've, Minnesotans have kind of an amazing propensity for rallying around the idea of being exceptional and doing things better than they've been done before and doing things in a way that is uniquely Minnesotan. And so, folks may have a lot of different individual objectives for their businesses, but ultimately, I think folks increasingly are realizing that if we are going to stand the chance as standing up the market with this vision, that everybody has to work together and we have to have all boats rise.
So how did you get reception? One of the things that I see are folks that really have a close mind about cannabis and about, the reefer madness legacy continues. People have a misconception of what the plant is. And also, speaking of the plant, we have the plant, but then we have this dual program that you have. I want to get into that, but how did you get reception with folks that had their guard up and were just not into it?
Yeah, I think a few things really helped. Again, once we opened up the hemp-derived market, that became immensely, immensely helpful. even before opening up the THC hemp market, quite frankly, just even the opening of like the CBD products and things like that were, I think, really instrumental in this state, especially a state that does have an agricultural tradition. And so we had these local hemp-based businesses that were selling CBD and things like that. And who are they selling them to? By and large, senior citizens who are buying these products. And so their entire relationship with the plant is different. And it's something often when I'm talking to folks from other states, I'm interested in knowing, what the portion of like seniors that use products in their states are. Because in ours, it's huge. We have a booth at the state fair for the Cannabis Growers Cooperative every year, and like 70% of the people that come by are seniors. And so I think once you're able to get like acceptance among that category, it has sort of a trickle down effect. But I think by and large, everywhere that we look, we're seeing that like acceptance and the stigma is going down among all groups. It's a nonpartisan issue. You're seeing, at least in this state, when they did polling across different religious groups and things like that, the stigma's just down across the board.
We see that across the country. That being said, I'm more specifically talking about the politicians that can't wrap their head around, a legal program.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the politicians, they can't wrap their heads around. There's still a good number of them, and quite frankly, like their constituents are ultimately going to drag them over the line on some of this. But I think, there is a generation of political leader for whom just really entrenched, but I think they increasingly are finding themselves out of touch with their constituencies. Yeah.
One of the plus sides of going through, 24 committees by the end of it, was that we did get to say a lot of these things over and over again, which may not have moved, your dyed-in-the-wool politicians that were going to stick with whatever their literal party line was. But it gave us a great opportunity to use them to get that message out further. As reporters were covering the discussions that were happening, as news was doing interviews and picking things up, because over and over again, that's the question that comes up. What about the children? What about the driving? What about, the health, this and that? What about gateway drugs? And it gave us ample opportunity again and again and again in multiple formats, multiple spaces, and in the highest levels of our state government to say that is outdated thinking. We need you to understand that is not truth, and this is misinformation now, and we want to tell you what this can actually be if we legalize it correctly.
And I think by and large, I mean, that's the thing that, especially, for some of those Democrats that were on the margin, and in the House, we even, had a few Republicans that voted for the legislation. It was that, just objective fact that prohibition has failed, to meet any of even the most basic of its public policy goals, including like keeping cannabis away from children and keeping roads safe. It hasn't done anything to impact those. So, I think there were enough folks that even if they were uncomfortable with the idea of legalization, they understood that a regulatory framework was going to work better than a framework of prohibition that was largely illusory, except insofar that it's punitive.
100%.
In a racist way.
So yesterday I was catching up with an old friend of mine who's deeply involved in lobbying on the Farm Bill and California legislative affairs and so on. And she described your program as the most progressive in the country and the gateway to the future. Pretty good. Why?
Well, I think the gateway to the future part, really does have to do with the way we legalize those THC, the low-dose THC products that were hemp-derived. This has allowed Minnesota to have the most destigmatized market in the entire country. In Minnesota, you can get THC products at restaurants, at the bowling alley. My ski chalet has it, at the hair salon, the local men's boutique. I mean, these products are by and large available places you would find all sorts of consumer, and so it has simultaneously just opened up entirely different market categories, and just the entire consumer approach to the product is different than I think it ever has before. The consumer's experience and expectations of what THC is and how they can consume it and what kind of person consumes it are fundamentally different here. It's something that you have just with your dinner. It's something sessionable, so you're consuming it in lower doses, but over an extended period of time. It is the diversity of products that people want to have access to. The emphasis on wanting additional functionality beyond just getting high. People here are very interested in what are the other phytocannabinoids that you are including in the product, and what does that mean in terms of the functional experience that I have. And I think what that means is when we finally get, well, now we're on the precipice of rescheduling, but once, it is legalized, Minnesota is going to have the marketplace that's most ready to just flip over to that.
And when do mushrooms come into this?
Yeah, so we pretty much, as soon as we were done with this, kickstarted our business's psychedelic practice. And we do have a multi-stakeholder project that includes a lot of the same folks that were involved in legalization, but also a lot of different stakeholders that have come together. It's called the Psychedelic Access Project that we've been leading, in that it's culturally very different from cannabis, both politically and from an industry standpoint. So yeah, it's definitely exciting working on that as well. But we're already seeing some of our municipalities, Minneapolis, for example, have decriminalized and want to be at the forefront of this.
When we were getting started in this industry about 8 years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine in Colorado, a lawyer out of Denver, was saying, we're going to get a ballot initiative on decrim of mushrooms. And I thought it was fucking nuts. I could not wrap my head around the voting public understanding the value and the benefits of it. And it's really, we're at a cultural milestone here where that's about to turn. And I couldn't be more excited for us as a country. Raising the elevating the operating frequency of everybody is a good idea in general.
I think so too. And I've really been impressed by the industry folks, at the intersection of the two industries, but also, the folks that are really focused on the psychedelics, the emphasis and the focus on, bringing, ethics to the interactions with the consumers and education focus, but same thing, with the way they interact with policymakers, I think is really going to be instrumental in having a smoother pathway, I think, for those products and for that industry to open up.
It's a lot scarier, though, for folks to wrap their heads around. And what's interesting is that, in Minnesota, the hemp-derived was everywhere. Here in Los Angeles and California, mushrooms are everywhere. You walk into a head shop and they're selling chocolate bars right in the front of everybody. So it's a similar situation where we have it happening. It's all seeping through. But unfortunately, the hurdle is just so much bigger for the mushroom world. Let's go back to the program in terms of the dual strategy. How did that, firstly, good job on listening to everybody, but how did that turn into actual policy that people could sign on for?
What do you mean the dual?
Dual use is the you have both hemp derived and cannabis derived. That is, but as far as I know, very unique.
It's unique and it's very intentional. There was a lot of intention on preserving that hemp-derived marketplace, and then structuring that segment of the industry, and then the adult use side with care so that there is some parity and fairness. The idea being, when you're on the hemp-derived side, you have these, potency limitations. It has to be, 5 milligrams per serving, 50 milligrams per package. But you're able to sell those products in a broader range of places. And just in general, the regulatory hurdles are lower. And then adult use side, obviously, you have the more stringent regulatory requirements, but you are able to sell higher potency products, and then you have the benefits of the government programs and things like that that are assigned to the adult use side. We see these two marketplaces as being quite complementary. You're going to have some consumers that really don't see themselves as adult use consumers, and they're going to stay on that hemp-derived side. I think you're going to have a lot of folks that get introduced to these products on the hemp-derived side and do become adult use consumers.
Are you alluding to a gateway?
I'm alluding to a gateway, and I'm alluding to what I think is going to be a really excellent gateway from a consumer experience standpoint. And I think it's something you already see with our, they're sort of our like pre-dispensaries, right? They're the shops right now that are selling the hemp-derived edibles and beverages, but they're planning on, becoming dispensaries. I mean, what you see is the consumers are not coming in, and it's not that experience that I've often had in other states where it's just like, well, here's the highest THC percentage product and that's what you're buying. I mean, these are consumers that are coming in, and there's a lot more focus on either, what it is that they want from like a product type standpoint, or what it is that they want from an effect standpoint. You have much more educated customers looking for a range of things, and I think that'll carry over to what the adult use offering market looks like. But the hemp-derived marketplace has also created incredible economic opportunities for our craft breweries that, especially after COVID, really were suffering. This has been a significant portion of their revenues in recent years. So ensuring that they were able to continue being a part of the industry in that way, and engaging our hemp industry as part of that has been pretty central to us. Yeah.
On the cannabis side, you will have more educated buyers. Is there an education program in place for budtenders and for owners?
I don't believe that there's a program in place. I know that like UFCW does some training programs and things like that. I don't think there's anything state mandated yet.
Yeah.
I would have to look. I think it's probably something they'll figure out in rulemaking. Yeah, I don't think there's anything standard.
When Canada went legal in 2018, we were launching stores left and right on behalf of our clients up there. And a lot of them had education centers built into the store because it's a new market. They didn't have as much legacy and so on. The problem was that the people that were manning or staffing those education centers really weren't educated themselves.
Yeah.
And so over the first year, people started shutting those down as they went. And I don't love the idea of consumers doing trial and error. Educated trial and error, maybe, but it's scary to think about somebody. And obviously, ODing is not a thing. However, having a bad experience is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a good flag, actually, that you raised. A lot of what we're doing right now is this kind of having conversations with folks from other states. And they're like, hey, by the way, have you thought about this or this happened? And then we're like,
Yeah, right.
We spend a lot of time, also vetting, like, for this kind of thing, that there does need to education provided and things like that. I mean, the minute we legalized, the floodgates that opened up were all the consultants that were like, I do this, pay me to do that, I'll train this, I will put in place, and there are a lot of great folks that have come into this state and come with wonderful expertise from other states. And we love being able to put our local businesses in contact with them so that they can avail themselves of that wonderful expertise. And then there have been a lot of folks that have come in. And unfortunately, often we learn way after the fact that they don't know what they're doing. And they're pushing, a false bill of goods, or, we have a lot of anxious businesses who then will end up spending money. So a lot of our time right now is just spent on that kind of watchdogging. So I'm going to put that on the list of things that we should watchdog.
Yeah. I'll introduce you to Brittany Melville from Fatehi. They run a program for new store owners for a 10-week or 10-session program that helps them learn. And Wonderful. It's not consulting. The consulting world is broken. I think we all know that. And anybody can say they're a consultant and they might have a few good ideas, but new store owners will throw money at a problem because they don't know better. And
that's exactly it. Yeah. And that's a real challenge for us over here. Again, when these are small businesses, these are small businesses over here. Whatever money they're spending on consultants is money that they're not spending on operational readiness. Yep. We have a community of consultants where we really have this shared ethic that, like, we need these businesses to be successful for us to be successful. So right now our focus needs to be on finding all of that best, national talent, expertise, but also whatever it is they need, again, in terms of shared infrastructure, whether it's, insurance, employee benefit plans, it's training, it's whatever. And then we go out and sort of source those things, get those people to come in. We have a lot of conversations with them about how they can scale their offerings to be appropriately matched for the scale of business that we want to have here in Minnesota. And quite frankly, I mean, as sort of like, we are comfortable at times sort of playing that like gatekeeper role a little bit. We see ourselves as being defenders of our local industry. And it's when, folks from national outfits come in and say, we really want to like understand how your market is different so we can think about our offering, that we're like, okay, these are good people, let's sit down and talk with them, versus the folks that come in with a,
with a megaphone. And
or like set offering for X amount of money, I will do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, you don't know what we're even doing here.
Yeah, we've gotten really close with our friends in the industry over the years that we've seen show up the right way at the right time with the right offering. And it's staggering how many organizations out there just don't get it. They don't understand that every market is different. Every owner is unique, and you have to listen. It's hard. It's hard for a lot of businesses to understand because they have to, report to their shareholders or their investors and so on about growth, as opposed to saying, okay, you know what, we'll take the slow path. It'll be more rewarding, but everybody calm down. I'm going to figure this all out together. Yeah. There are a lot of great vendors out there, but there's also a lot of snake oil being sold at very inflated rates. And it's scary. And I think your state is lucky to have you there vetting on their behalf.
Well, thank you. We have a wonderful industry, and we're delighted to be able to be a part of it.
It is fascinating, right? You don't see an industry being born every day. We're really lucky to be here.
Yeah, we really are. We really are. And here in Minnesota, we've been particularly lucky to have, the cohort of industry leaders we have, but also, we've had incredible policymakers that really have trusted in the wisdom of local stakeholders to advocate for, what's best for the state.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the near term and longer term future. What does the rest of the year look like, and then beyond?
Yeah, so we got to get through the end of our legislative session, which is in 11 days. So we're going to be continuing to push for just some more clarity on the licensing timeline and process. And then once that's done, rulemaking. I mean, our Office of Cannabis Management should really be in the thick of rulemaking. And so we'll be doing a lot of work both through Blunt Strategies and through the Minnesota Cannabis Growers Co-op and the industry council that we work with on that process. And then we're continuing to work with as many clients and stakeholders as we can to get them operation ready. We are launching something called the Blunt Strategies Grow House, which is a startup studio for helping some of the more creative and ambitious cannabis businesses here in Minnesota, as well as to really begin to put together all the building blocks that businesses will need to get started up, sort of all in a showroom space. So we're excited for that. What am I forgetting, Laura?
Yeah, we're busy, which is great. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with our Minnesota Women's Cannabis Network. That was something that we launched alongside launching Blunt Strategies back in 2019 as a way to do exactly what it sounds like, was to support women who wanted to be in this industry. I'll say it should actually be named the Minnesota Doesn't Identify as a Man Cannabis Network, but it doesn't quite trip off the tongue. But it's for anyone that doesn't identify as a man who wants to, get some support, learn from others. We've seen nothing but fabulous creativity and collaboration in this industry. And we know that folks want to work together. They certainly want to work with Minnesotans, but they also want to work with women, and they want to make sure that they're aware of the broad spectrum of expertise that we have that they can call upon. So we get together every other month, and we're in a room together. We usually have at least 50 people turn out. And it's great. It's very casual. We do it no cost. It's just something that we like to do to bring folks together and be able to learn with and from one another.
It's really amazing. Women are underrepresented across the board in this industry. And anything we can do to bring folks in that are underrepresented is a good thing. Amazing. So any parting thoughts that we didn't cover? We went all over the place. Is there anything we didn't cover that we should have?
No, I think we covered. Yeah, I think we covered the bulk of the exciting things here in Minnesota. But yeah, we always are excited to have folks come visit us here in Minnesota. And if they are, they should contact us. And we have a nice list of places to go visit and businesses to check in on. We have a really, really exciting and vibrant cannabis market here with some of the most exciting products and some of the coolest entrepreneurs. And so we're always happy to make introductions and take people out for a good time.
I'll be out there in about a month and a half. I will hit you up.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you both for coming today. Really appreciate it. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.